So today we're going to talk about understanding racial and gender bias in search algorithms. In today's presentation, we'll examine the idea of search neutrality, explore racial and gender biases in search, and try to understand how human beings influence search algorithms to produce biased results. To start our definitions, let's first look at bias. Here's a screenshot showing the Oxford Languages definition of bias in Google search results. Bias is defined as, quote, prejudice in favor or against one thing, person, or group compared with another, usually in a way considered to be unfair. So bias can be understood as a prejudice for or prejudice against, as a preference for or prejudice against something, which is often unfair or unjust. There are many different types of bias, such as conscious or explicit bias, unconscious or implicit bias, cognitive bias, prejudice or stereotyping, prejudging, and so on. Today, we're going to be seeing examples of how bias can surface in search technology. Some of these biases we'll examine today are explicitly racist or sexist, or both. Some work on inference or suggestion, or rely on known stereotypes. The second thing we want to understand is what an algorithm actually is. We often hear the word algorithm when discussing search or machine learning or artificial intelligence, but understanding what it really is can be hard to pin down. Merriam-Webster's broad definition of an algorithm is a step-by-step procedure for solving a problem or accomplishing some end. We can think of a recipe as an algorithm or a knitting pattern as an algorithm. But algorithms are also much more complex than this, and their definitions can change depending on who is defining the term. The algorithms we encounter in our daily lives, and there are many, are really algorithms upon algorithms, all connected together to form complex structures powering things like Google search. And we have very little understanding of these algorithms. In Matthew Reedsma's book, Masked by Trust, he describes that commercial algorithms like the ones Google uses are, quote, black boxes. The components or workings of the system are hidden from view. Quote, search algorithms, he says, are largely kept secret because they are the primary intellectual property asset of the parent company. And so sharing the details of how they work would devalue the primary revenue generating asset the company has. Now that we have a shared vocabulary, let's look at the concept of search neutrality or objectivity in search. These next few slides feature a lot of screenshots from Google's documentation called How Search Works. In the book, Algorithms of Oppression, Sophia Noble makes a strong argument that Google is not an information company, but an advertising company, beholden to its shareholders and to the bottom line. Google explains its advertising as a way to enable freely accessible search for all people, and that their interest is in, quote, only showing useful ads, ones which are relevant to the user's search query. They also clearly highlight that ads are labeled, easily distinguishable from the rest of the page, and that Google gives no special advantages or treatment in search results to anyone buying ads. Google describes their results as the most relevant and reliable. Reedsma describes an increase in the authority of algorithms to make everyday decisions as our, quote, increasing faith that the algorithm will deliver a more objective decision than a human could, that somehow the algorithm eliminates the human biases that we often see coloring our decisions. And Google's descriptions of how their algorithms work reflect this idea. Reedsma states that Google handles around 3.5 billion searches a day from over 4 billion internet users. And of these searches, Google says 15% are ones they have never seen before. Google is very careful to point out that real people are involved in measuring search results, but not in ranking. Ranking is purely algorithmic, and therefore, as we have seen suggested earlier, not subject to human bias. So how does Google rank and serve relevant results? The company says that Google's ranking systems sort through hundreds of billions of web pages and other content to present the most relevant, useful results in a fraction of a second. Search algorithms look at many factors and signals, including the words of your query, relevance and usability of pages, expertise of sources, and your location and settings. But Google is aware that problematic content can appear. They say, quote, no system is 100% perfect, and quote, occasionally results may contain content that some find objectionable or offensive. Note that Google does not say that they serve results which may include biased or even factually incorrect information, just that some people may find that information offensive. And they are quick to point out that, quote, such problematic content does not reflect Google's own opinions. They also clarify that policy violating content is resolved by improving automated systems first, and then in some cases, human beings may take manual action to block the content, but not rearrange ranked results. Google is careful to distance itself from the problematic content while also emphasizing the objectivity of automated systems. Looking at autocomplete or auto-suggest systems specifically, we see the same pattern. Google distances itself from the problem by saying, quote, autocomplete predictions aren't perfect, and quote, predictions aren't assertions of facts or opinions. And then once again, they emphasize the system as a solution, but they also fall back on enforcement teams that manually remove predictive content that violates Google's policies. What are policy violating predictions? Google says autocomplete has policies against elections-related predictions, health-related predictions, and sensitive and disparaging terms associated with named individuals. Next, we're going to talk about what we believe about search and how we use it. This data is from the 2012 Pew Internet and American Life Survey. In 2002, 52% of all Americans use search engines. In 2012, that number jumped up to 73%. And also in 2012, 91% of search engine users said they always or most of the time find the information they are seeking when they use search engines. 73% of search engine users say that most or all the information they find as they use search engines is accurate and trustworthy. And 66% of search engine users say search engines are a fair and unbiased source of information. 55% or half of search engine users say that in their experience, the quality of search results is getting better over time, while just 4% say it has gotten worse. And 52% of search engine users say search engine results have gotten more relevant and useful over time, while just 7% report that results have gotten less relevant. The simple design interface of a Google search is purposeful. Rietzma states that the interface, quote, works to enhance the user's trust in the search engine. And he points out that the design choices Google has made have been copied by other search engines, library discovery systems, and library research databases, as shown in this screenshot of UNCW's summon page. In critiquing these design choices, Noble writes that, when designers use clean aesthetics to cover over a complex reality, to take something human, nuanced, and rife with potential for bias and flatten it behind a seamless interface, they're not making it easier for you. They're just hiding the flaws in their model and hoping that you won't ask too many difficult questions. The Pew Internet and American Life Survey from 2012 also sheds some light on how we use search engines. We are confident in our search abilities. More than half of search users, or 56%, say they are very confident in their search abilities, while only 6% say they are not or not at all confident. And the vast majority of search users report being able to find what they are looking for always, 29%, or most of the time, 62%. Users said they had learned something new or important that really helped them or increased their knowledge, found a really obscure fact or piece of information that they thought they would not be able to find, gotten conflicting information in search results and had not been able to figure out what is correct, and that's less than half, gotten so much information in a set of results that you feel overwhelmed, and found that critical information is missing from search results, and that's only 34% of respondents. Next, we're going to show some examples of algorithmic bias. In her book, Technically Wrong, Sarah Wachter-Becher examines multiple cases of bias in information technology systems. One such example is of Google Photos auto-tagging feature mischaracterizing selfies of two Black people as gorillas. This terminology, of course, has a long racist history when used to describe Black people. No human being was involved in this tagging, as she explains. The technology is based on deep neural networks, which are, quote, massive systems of information that enable machines to see much in the same way the human brain does. Neural networks use a learning algorithm. Instead of following programmed predetermined steps, the algorithm is fed historical data, which it parses, identifies patterns, and then makes determinations about new information based on those patterns. In response to this mistake, Dr. Betcher reports that Google's Jonathan Zunger, then chief social architect of Google, said on Twitter that we're working, quote, we're working on longer term fixes around image recognition itself, e.g. better recognition of dark-skinned faces, which implies that the historical data fed to Google Photos possibly failed to include pictures of Black or other minority people. This is a significant lapse in judgment, which Dr. Betcher says is based on assumptions that technologists so often make. The data they have is neutral and that anything at the edges can be written off. By 2022, Google was actually promoting a feature of its Pixel 6 phones called Real Tone, which represents, quote, nuances of different skin tones for all people beautifully and authentically. From this, we can assume that they have solved their image recognition problem and even decided to promote its solution as a feature advertised to consumers. Noble's book, Algorithms of Oppression, contains many examples of biased search results and autocomplete predictions. One example she raised when discussing how Google's PageRank algorithm works is in the search results for the word Jew, which included a, quote, significant number of anti-Semitic pages. In 2005, Google published an explanation of our search results, explaining that anti-Semitic results for the word Jew were showing up in search results, and recommending users search instead for Jews or Jewish people. Noble asserts that this statement is, quote, claiming that the company can do nothing about the word's co-optation by white supremacist groups. She replicated the search in 2012 and noticed that Google now linked the explanation from a beige box at the bottom of the page. However, a search today for the word Jew produces no problematic results and no links to that explanation page, implying that Google has now blocked anti-Semitic results from this search. This screenshot from 2022 shows the first half of results for the word Jew in Google search results. No anti-Semitic resources appear at all on the first page of search results. It's harder to find examples of biased search results today, and not to the magnitude that Noble found when researching algorithms of oppression. She searched for terms like Black girls and Asian girls and was rewarded with results pages full of pornography and sexist and racist stereotypes. Since then, Google has obviously blocked or otherwise influenced the rankings of search results to remove some of the most egregious racist and sexist examples, as you cannot replicate Noble's results. But stereotypes and biases still exist. These screenshots are from March of this year. Next, we'll look at examples of bias in library discovery systems. Matthew Reedsma published his book, Masked by Trust, in 2019. He examines bias in library discovery by querying various discovery platforms and recording his results. In Summon, he found that a year and a half after the election, the Topic Explorer showed outdated Wikipedia entries for Donald Trump and Barack Obama, declaring Obama the president and Trump a real estate and entertainment mogul. In EBSCO Discovery Service, a search for rape culture showed an encyclopedia article about rape myths in the research starter at the top of the page. In Summon, a search for Muslim terrorists in the United States resulted in a Wikipedia entry about the Islamic religion in the US as a whole. Reedsma also found very different search results for using the search terms 9/11, September 11, and September 11th, with the 9/11 search appearing to emphasize conspiracy theories about the event. He asks, quote, what are we to make of these radically different results based on small changes in our search terms for a monumentally important topic? In some of these examples, we see outdated information that is factually incorrect, but in others, there are implicit biases at play. And now I'm going to conclude my presentation. Reedsma concludes that the quote, unexpected biased results that appear in seemingly objective search tools are the result of treating everything like a math problem, assigning numerical values to unquantifiable things, of accepting measurable proxies for slippery concepts and ideas. It's important to start with knowledge. If we know algorithms are biased and sometimes even untrustworthy, we can work towards a solution. We must recognize the limitations of algorithms and learn how to approach search results with skepticism. And we must share this knowledge with our patrons and users. It's not just a matter of improving diversity in Silicon Valley. In October 2021, CNET reported that multiple tech companies, including Apple and Google, had signed on to a DEI initiative to improve diversity and inclusion in their companies. But as Noble points out, this puts the onus on marginalized people to learn coding or become programmers or somehow step into leadership roles. She says, quote, we have automated human decision-making and then disavowed our responsibility for it. Algorithmic bias is a multi-layered problem that needs many different solutions working together. Wachter Becher writes, quote, if technology has the power to connect the world, as technologists so often proclaim, then it also has the power to make the world a more inclusive place, simply by building interfaces that reflect all its users. Here are some films and books to look for if you are interested in more information about this topic. I was not able to discuss all of these resources in my presentation, but I can recommend them. And if you have any questions, here's my contact information. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Marcella. It's very, very interesting. You were talking about the sort of, if anyone has questions, definitely you can raise your hand. I can hopefully let her know or type in chat. And yeah, one thing I was thinking about when you're talking about this is I remember hearing in grad school an anecdote about people training they're training a neural network to identify different breeds of dog. And one of the things that happened is that they used these images, and they ended up they used, based on the sample of the images that they chose, every single dog that was pictured in the snow was identified as like a wolf. And so then, when the person put the sample of their regular dog out in the snow, the algorithm said, oh, well, obviously this is like a dog-shaped object in the snow. So clearly this dog must be some kind of dog-wolf hybrid or wolf. And so anyway, basically it was an example of, the data set that they use sort of biasing these algorithms very heavily, getting a negative result. And so, yeah, I think that's it's very, very relevant to the modern world. So.
Absolutely. And you can see that same sort of scenario playing out in the Google pictures that were tagged as gorillas for Black people, where they really used a data set that did not include minority faces or dark colored skin, and therefore prejudiced the results of their auto tagging neural network.
Yeah, sure. Marcella, can you go back a slide to the resources or the resources used?
Sure.
I have a question. What tips does Marcella?
Yeah, Marcella.
Has for teaching this kind of algorithmic information to first-year students and NASA researchers who may not understand the underpinnings of Google? I know I would teach the algorithmic information versus librarian, so I typically teach one-shot sessions, but there may be other opportunities for me to engage with colleagues and students outside of those sessions. And I was just wondering, what approaches do you take to doing that in class?
Yeah, let me see. Okay, did you want to come ask her?
Well, I mean, basically, what approach did you? I don't know.
That's fine. No, that's fine.
Basically, what approach to instruction would you do to teach, particularly first-year students, about algorithms like this, how they work and bias?
Yeah, sure. So we have a question about what tips or what strategies would you use to help, particularly first-year students in teaching about these algorithms and these kind of biases?
I think it's actually kind of hard to find and difficult to search for, but if you can find examples of algorithmic bias, like I showed in that one slide for the auto suggest. That's a really powerful tool, like that, just showing visually, look, see in front of you, there's stereotypes, there's biases, there's implicit bias right here in auto suggest or in Google search results. Also sharing examples of different Google results or stuff from especially from Algorithms of Oppression. That book really gets into a lot of examples of different algorithmic bias. I think is also very powerful because a lot of students may not initially believe you. We have the Pew internet report that I shared showed that a lot of us feel like our searching is very good and that we do very good searching and that what we find is relevant and accurate and truthful and factual. So it can be difficult to really drive home the message that because these networks, neural networks and proxies and data sets are built by people, they include biases that people have.
I guess I had another question. So Marcella, in going over these resources in these books, was there any, was there ever a discussion about how things like controlled vocabularies and structured data, like how those could be relevant? I'm thinking, in particular, like when people talk about changing like LC headings and those kind of things, like was there any discussion about how that factors into these algorithms, or is that maybe maybe that's barking down the wrong tree? I'm not sure. So.
No, there was certainly discussion of I didn't really get into it in my presentation, but Noble and Readsma both look at how libraries and library resources can be biased. And they both include an examination of subject headings, cataloging labels and terms, and some other resources and example. And I would really recommend Readsma's book, Matthew Readsma's book, Masked by Trust, as it's a great resource for what's going on in library discovery systems today.
Do we have any other questions?
I have a question
from
Zoomland. Is anybody reporting any of this or discussing this with the vendors? Do you know, Marcella?
Readsma did say that he participates in various discussion lists and groups and work groups with the vendors, and that he has reported back some of his findings. And in reporting them, especially the factually incorrect Wikipedia findings that were very out of date and very wrong, he was able to get Ex Libris to update their algorithm in terms of how often they pull data down from Wikipedia and display it back on to some in search results. So there was some active change that happened from his book and his research.
I have a question. This is Laura Johnson from Livingstone College. I'd be interested to know how you got interested in involving yourself in finding out more about this information, or was there an assignment you had to do where you started to look into this? What was your reasoning for getting into it and trying to find out more about this?
I was invited to review Readsma's book, Masked by Trust, and that really opened my eyes to just like this whole topic and this whole area of research. And from there, I started reading other books, especially Sophia Noble's Algorithms of Oppression, I highly recommend. And I just started doing the research on my own and decided that it would make a really great presentation topic.
Yeah, I'm not sure. The question is if coded bias is available on NC Live. I'm not 100% sure actually.
It is for sure on Netflix.
Okay.
So I don't think it's available on NC Live.
Well, if we don't have any other questions, I guess, thanks so much, Marcella. It's very fascinating. I think particularly, I think the mass by trust sounds very, very interesting, and I'll have to check that out. So
I highly recommend it.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And yeah, and the slides will either be available, they're either available now on